.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We are joined by Don Barlett and Jim Steele. They are the authors of the new book, The Betrayal of the American Dream. I want to go to the issue of the Olympics since they're happening in London right now. In 2001, you wrote a story called Snow Job about the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City, headed by none other than the Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney. In your investigation, Snow Job, about these Olympics, which you published in Sports Illustrated, you reported, quote, the $1.5 billion in taxpayer money that Congress is pouring into Utah is 1.5 times the amount spent by lawmakers to support all 7 Olympic Games held in the U.S. since 1904 combined. Jim Steele.
Well, it's an interesting position for somebody who's against new taxes and wants to cut the deficit, that here you had somebody heading an Olympic committee where that entire operation raided the federal treasury like no other Olympics in history. And they got everything, the Salt Lake infrastructure around Salt Lake, sewer lines, land exchanges that transformed average snow resorts, ski resorts into world-class resorts. All of these things happened one way or another under Romney's watch, and that's what astonished us about this comment he made where he was dissing the London Olympics. I mean, because that they're not operating right, they're not doing this right. I mean, I think he's so vulnerable in that issue, and everybody who had anything to do with the Salt Lake Olympics is very vulnerable on that. The thing that struck us so much, and here was Utah, a state famously with a great antipathy to paying any kind of taxes, but they had absolutely no qualms whatsoever about raiding the federal treasury to take care of all of their needs for really the next generation. So the fact that he would make this point in London just frankly astonished us.
Jim's right. I mean, Utah got out of this anything they wanted. The other states would have had to have paid for on their own. Utah got from the federal government. And so it's the other thing, this hypocrisy of people like Romney who want everyone in the middle and the bottom to pay their own way, but they themselves have no trouble grabbing as much money as they can get out of Washington. And they do it all the time. And it's just astonishing. But people generally don't know it. The news media does not do what it should do in this area. It never has. And so part of the problem here is because most people today get their news from TV, and it's not public TV, as you well know. It's commercial TV. And commercial TV is not about to do this kind of work. It just isn't.
It's interesting with NBC covering the Olympics around the clock. We're not seeing any of the protests that are taking place and the increasing anger of the small businessmen in East London who are getting wiped out. The whole issue of not criticizing the corporate sponsors right. Getting huge right. numbers of seats, yet they don't fill them. These arenas are now empty. And so the British government is trying to get soldiers in there, their families, school kids, someone. Right. But it shows that these seats and these arenas, these stadiums were sold out years in advance, and now no one's there because the corporations aren't people.
Yeah, the Olympics, like
wait a minute.
Like so many of these other issues. I mean, like Don said, I mean, Romney and so many of the policies that he advocates will benefit very few. I mean, his tax structure, the tax structure of the wealthy in this country, the tax structure of the whole country is now geared just solely to benefiting the wealthy. I mean, some of the statistics are amazing. I mean, the wealth of the top 1% in this country is greater than the wealth of the bottom 90%. That is a staggering figure. And one of the things that has made that possible has been a whole series of tax changes over a long period of time, mainly in the last 10 years. I mean, one of the things they've done in the last 10 years that we just cannot get over was in 2003 when they made dividend income taxable at 15%. This was the first time ever that dividend income was treated differently than somebody earning a wage or a salary. And the idea that that somehow should be more favored than somebody working the sweat of their brow is absolutely ridiculous and appalling.
There's going to be, in the coming weeks, you know better than anyone, just a constant, I don't know what you call them, but out of Washington on taxes and how we're penalizing entrepreneurs and all of that garbage. And I say garbage for this reason. If people focus on two numbers, that's all you need to do. In 1955, 50 of the top 400 households in this country, they paid 51.2% of their income in taxes. That's 1955. In 2007, they paid 16.6%. And everybody's talking about a deficit. Of course there's a deficit, and there's going to always be a deficit until they impose the tax system that had existed in this country in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, in which people at the top who had money paid serious taxes. No one, but no one at the top pays serious taxes at a remotely close to what their peers would have paid back in the 60s and 70s.
Journalist Nick Shaxson of your magazine, Vanity Fair, wrote about Mitt Romney's fortune called Where the Money Lives. We spoke to Nick Shaxson about how someone as wealthy as Romney has an average personal tax rate, as you're saying, of less than 15%.
This is about the U.S. tax code. This is the way that privileged people like Mitt Romney and hedge fund managers and private equity titans receive their income. They receive it as a thing called carried interest, which many people would argue is just like ordinary income. It's just like a salary earned by anybody else, and should earn the top tax rate. But instead, for historical reasons and reasons of lobbying, it is taxed at a very low rate of 15%. Mitt Romney's tax rate is a little bit lower than that. He has, for various other reasons, he has deductions and earns other kinds of income as well. But it's not too far off 15%. But carried interest is the tax treatment of carried interest is the sort of essential reason why his tax rate is so much lower than many Americans.
I want to go to his role. Oh, go ahead, Don.
Just we need to point out, all these pleas for him to release the rest of his tax returns, which every candidate has always done, and that's it, you're not getting any more from me. And people wonder.
And his father, George Romney, set the precedent by doing it for 12 years when he ran for president.
Well, his father was kind of a straight arrow compared to Mitt. I mean, but we wonder in the back of our minds that there may not be anything in those returns, but he may be amending them furiously. And this is what candidates do once they reach a point where, oh my God, this is going to become public. We've got to go back and clean up the returns.
How do you clean it up?
Well, you file an amended return. And that's not uncommon. Gee, we had a mistake here. We need to correct that.
And so it completely replaces the one that was there.
Exactly. And in our minds, we think, that's the more likely thing that's going on here. It's not that they're afraid of something in those returns. It's that they are being sanitized.
Earlier this month, Mitt Romney gave a series of television interviews defending his role at Bain Capital. This is Romney speaking to CNN's Jim Acosta.
There's nothing wrong with being associated with Bain Capital, of course, but the truth is that I left any role at Bain Capital in February of '99. And that's known and said by the people at the firm. It's said by the offering documents that the firm made subsequently about people investing in the firm. And I think anybody who knows that I was out full-time running the Olympics would understand that's where I was. I spent 3 years running the Olympic Games, and after that was over, we worked out our retirement program, our departure official program for Bain Capital, and handed over the shares I had. But there's a difference between being a shareholder, an owner, if you will, and being a person who's running an entity. And I had no role whatsoever in managing Bain Capital after February of 1999.
That's Mitt Romney speaking on CNN. James Steele.
I think that whole story is still probably evolving and developing exactly where he was at that time, which is one of the reasons it'd be nice to see the tax returns, to see exactly what some of that material said at the time. But I think the most significant thing about Bain isn't just that period of time. Bain, like every one of the private hedge funds, the private equity funds, very much involved in basically killing jobs one way or another. And because when they take over a company, people are jettisoned, let loose, streamed down. Sometimes the work is sent offshore. And that's just the way they work, and they've always worked that way, whether it was when he was there or after. It's just the common way all those private equity funds function. And I think that's why so much of a furor is built up about this, because people know this. I mean, that's the thing we found out when we went around the country and we talked to people here and there. People know what's going on in this country. They know a lot of the deck is being stacked against them. They know that they're almost powerless when one of those companies buys a company. I mean, some very famous companies like Birdseye were bought by another private equity firm, Blackstone. All kinds of people let go. The company supposedly streamlined. You see that sort of thing across industries, food, computers, technology, so forth. That's just the way that process works, and that's just how the deck is so stacked against the average person and in favor of the equity companies. Nick was talking about the carried interest. We have a whole section in the book about carried interest. And it's a complex concept that people sometimes have trouble getting their mind around.
If you could explain it simply.
But it is just an outrageous thing. The idea is, if you are heading one of those private equity funds, you take a portion of the interest of one of these companies that you were theoretically managing. Part of your salary comes part of your money comes in a salary, a direct salary, which is paid at normal rates. But part of it is supposedly an interest in this company, but you haven't bought that interest. You've just been given it as the manager. And then when you cash out on that, because it's supposedly you were an investor, you pay the 15%. And that, as much as anything, as Nick was talking about, is why somebody like Romney and other private equity moguls make 15%. You know, there was a big boomlet to try to get rid of this a few years ago. And there were hearings in the Senate and the House, and a lot of people thought, oh boy, this thing is going to change. But once again, people do not seem to realize how powerful those interests are in Washington. And they trotted out all kinds of people to lobby against it, mainly the private equity funds. I mean, Henry Kravis, on down the line, all of those people actually paid visits to Capitol Hill.
It's called vampire capitalism?
Vampire capitalism, and that's an excellent word, and that's exactly what it is. And they defeated the effort to try to change that. I mean, this Congress, you couldn't do it at all. But back then, there was a little bit more common sense that some people had. But even then, they couldn't get that thing changed. And it, as much as anything, illustrates how this system is totally geared against the average person. There's no defense for that tax break. And it's something that was not basically used years ago. But it's typical of how folks in power figure out a way to bring the code to their advantage. And when it happens, Congress should amend it and change it. But because of that interest in that lobbying, that's frustrating.
I want to turn to President Obama's recent attack on Mitt Romney's record at Bain Capital.
I've said, let's stop giving tax breaks to companies that are shipping jobs overseas. Let's give tax breaks to companies that are investing right here in the United States of America and investing in American workers so we can make American products stamped with those three proud words, made in America. That's how we build an economy that lasts. And that's why I'm running for a second term as president. You know, Mr. Romney's got a different idea. You know, he invested in companies that have been called pioneers of outsourcing. I don't want to pioneer in outsourcing. I want some insourcing. I want to bring companies back.
That's President Obama. By the way, he's in New York tonight at the Nomad Hotel at a fundraising dinner. 60 guests spending $40,000 each at a hotel near the Gramercy Park.
We won't be there.
But his idea.
Well, his idea, I mean, is a very valid idea, because one of the things that's been happening with the multinationals is a lot of the money they earn offshore, they keep offshore. The estimates of the amount of money that companies like Apple, the technology companies, the pharmaceutical companies, some of the big manufacturing companies, their estimates are it's $2 trillion is sitting in foreign accounts that they will not bring back to this country. And the reason they will not bring it back, they say, is because of this onerous U.S. tax rate. But the fact of the matter is, once a few years ago, Congress waived that and let a number of them bring money back. And my memory is they brought back $3.3 billion in some of the assets that were there, with the understanding that they would create jobs here. But you know what they did? The leading companies that brought their money back actually killed 20-some thousand jobs, did not create jobs. I mean, it just gets back to what Don was saying earlier in terms of the power of these multinational corporations. They're beyond our control theoretically, and even when they get a right like that, it's not enforced. And as a result of that, no jobs are created.
I want to talk about breaking up the mega banks with you, pensions, what's happening to them, retirement, and more. Don Barlett and Jim Steele, authors of the new book, The Betrayal of the American Dream. 20 years ago, they wrote, America, What Went Wrong? While they were accused of exaggerating, they now say they didn't go far enough. Stay with us.